And good morning, and I hope you are all well, my fellow bigots, on this beautiful Tuesday morning. Why did I just say that? I'll get to that in just a moment. I've got a tale to tell you, a bit of a wandering tale. In fact, if you're near a computer, you can check some of this out on our Facebook page or perhaps our website, newsradio1310.com. First, what's coming up a little later in the program, we're going to be hearing from our good friend Steve Millington. He is the chairman of the Twin Falls Republican Party, and he is scheduled to join us in the studio at 9:30 this morning. Also coming up after news at 9 o'clock, Wayne Allyn Root will be joining us by telephone. Now, I say by telephone because Mr. Root would have a long drive otherwise. He lives quite a distance away from here. His stomping grounds have primarily been Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas over the last several years. He is a former candidate for president on the Libertarian Party line. I need to also mention that he is going to be talking with us today about some solutions that he recommends for some of our big cities like Baltimore, Maryland, which claim that they aren't getting enough of your money in order, well, they've gotten billions and billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars over the last 50 years from federal government and from taxpayers, and yet still can't turn things around. So he's going to share some thoughts with us a little later on maybe another way to improve the plight of these large cities and maybe allow us to hold on to some of our tax dollars. In the meantime, I wanted to open up today and I wanted to share with you a bit of a story that I've been sort of following for the last few days. It was late last week that we first learned that there is an effort underway, and some of you are obviously familiar with this too as well. There is an effort underway that would resettle hundreds, we're told hundreds, maybe 300 to 600 people who are Muslims from Syria. When the story was initially reported late last week, it was just, 300 to 600 refugees from Syria. We didn't know if they were Zoroastrians or if they were Jews or Christians or Muslims. And we were just told there would be 300 people, and then the number seemed to be 300 to 600. Now we're learning that already several of these people have been resettled here since the beginning of February. And those numbers are just certainly going to grow. And now I'm reading online that the numbers could end up in the thousands settled across the Magic Valley. Some people have been asking a lot of questions about this. How do we get any answers? What do we know about it? And so I wrote the folks at the College of Southern Idaho, dropped a line to a spokesman on campus who wrote me back and explained, and I think that this is a fairly good way to look at this. The College of Southern Idaho and the Refugee Resettlement Center are actually separate entities. The only reason that this is run through the college is because it's not. It's just simply they both share a board of trustees. So the board of trustees at the College of Southern Idaho happens to be the board of trustees as well over at the Refugee Resettlement Center. And as I understand it, the people who work at the Refugee Resettlement Center don't have a choice in who comes here. They have to follow marching orders that come out of Washington. And so what they're doing is they're following these marching orders, and the marching orders are, we're going to be resettling Syrians, make it happen. So that's the only duty that really goes on at that office. That office, of course, is, I looked up the website yesterday, and I was running down the website. I sent an email to the director and said, you're welcome to be a guest on the show. I did not get a reply. I suspect because they feel that they know what sort of, how shall we put it, reaction they might get, public reaction, especially if we opened up the telephones and actually asked some of the people listening to actually offer their thoughts or comment about all of this. But they have a big staff. There are a lot of people who are working over there, and I'm going to guess that they're also being paid by taxpayers because this money is just not simply popping up out of the ground in order to take care of all of these people who are working in that office. They have an extensive office with a large staff. Well, they have a lot of work to do. They have to bring people here. They have to find them housing. Then they have to get them. Now, the College of Southern Idaho, the spokesman says the college gets no money out of this. Certainly not directly. But on the other hand, once we resettle these people and rent them apartments at your expense and buy them groceries at your expense and buy them clothes at your expense, and I know it's the humanitarian thing to do and it's nice and it makes everybody feel better and all of that, but when they need to get some training for finding work, we have to send them off to the College of Southern Idaho. Who pays their tuition? Well, you do. So the College of Southern Idaho does get something out of it. They get that increased tuition, that little cushion, which comes from the taxpayers, guess what, of Idaho and the United States. So I understand there's no direct money flowing into anybody at the college because of this, but simply put, Obviously, something is going on here, and somebody is going to end up with some money from all of this, and that money is coming from someone else. So we can mark all of that down. Now, that said, if indeed this is a federal program, and nobody here has any say in this, apparently none of your county commissioners have a say in it, none of your town, village, or city governments have a say in it, none of your state legislators have a say in it, then ultimately we have to go to the federal government. And if you go to our website, newsradio1310.com, and you go to our on-air page, when you click that little tab, it'll give you my name, and then it reads next to it Colley's commentaries. The latest is called the Islamic Republic of Idaho. And if you read that, it explains who you need to contact. You need to contact Congressman Mike Simpson and U.S. Senators Jim Risch and Mike Crapo. And I have included their local telephone numbers. Now, I'm not going to repeat these over and over and over again for 2 hours. If you're a self-reliant human being, you could go look them up like I did. But I have published these in hopes that people can go to either our website, and I also have the link to that very same commentary posted at our KLIX Facebook page. So if you go to News Radio 1310 KLIX on Facebook, you will see it there as well. And there were close to 200 page views on that within an hour after I posted it, just after 6 o'clock this morning, which tells you people are greatly interested in this. Now, as I bring this up, and I'll share with you, go grab your paper and your pen or pencil, and while I'm waiting for you to do that, I will share with you another comment implied by the spokesman at the College of Southern Idaho that people who are bringing this subject up and asking questions about these people are bigots. I think that goes a little too far, because I'll tell you what, my guess is there are bigots who are employed by the College of Southern Idaho. There are bigots who are attending the College of Southern Idaho. There are bigots who listen to every radio station in town. There are bigots who watch every television station in the area. There are bigots who read the newspaper. Yes, there are bigots in American life. Sometimes they're sitting next to you at church. Sometimes you're running into them in the coffee shop. It happens. They go to movies, they do everything everybody else does. So what? We know they're out there and we know they are everywhere, but for the majority of people, they are not bigots. They just have some simple questions. And the first one is, who are these people who are coming here? I am old enough to remember, what was it called, the Mariel boat lift? Does anyone recall that in the late 1970s, when U.S. President at the time, Jimmy Carter, decided that he was going to bring in Cuban refugees who were trying to just boldly escape the communist tyranny in Cuba? And Fidel Castro said, sure, okay, go ahead. And he loaded up all the boats and sent them off to Miami, but he loaded them up with all of the people he cleaned out of his prisons, many of whom were drug dealers and cutthroats. And they came to this country, and we now know that they were the cause, likely, of the crack epidemic that swept the United States in the 1980s. Nobody vetted them. So we're well aware of this, and that the social ills from that, and that was over 35 years ago, the social ills from that boat lift from Cuba are still with us today. And now we are going to be bringing in perhaps thousands of people from Syria who have been involved in a civil war there. So violence, a lot of them have been victims. Let's be honest about that. Through no fault of their own, they have been victims, and I will acknowledge that. On the other hand, if you're bringing in thousands, it is a good possibility that some of those people are cutthroats too. So you need to call Mike Simpson, Jim Risch, and Mike Crapo. You've got to call their offices. And you've got to start voicing your concerns, because you as the public really need to have your questions answered. You have to have a say in this. This country is not run by fiat. Some bureaucrat in Washington or President Obama just doesn't simply say, I am going to move tens of thousands of people into your neighborhood and you have no say in this. That's not how it works. We have a representational form of government. So if you've got your pens and pencils ready, I'm going to be sharing with you some telephone numbers right now. And you can jot these down. I'm going to tell you this is very, very important, and you can make some of these telephone calls as well. And what I'd like you to do is write these down in order, and we'll do this, and then perhaps we'll have to save some time on the other side of the break as well. But if you're looking to contact Congressman Mike Simpson, now all of these are the 208 area code, so I'll just give you the number following that. To reach Simpson's local office, the number is 734-7244. That is 734-7244. That's for Mike Simpson. 734-7244. If you're looking to contact U.S. Senator Jim Risch, here's the number. 734-6780. Once more, for Jim Risch, 734-6780. You need to impress upon them that perhaps we need to have some sort of town hall meeting on this so we can have our questions answered and have a discussion about this. And maybe we'll all go away saying, hey, this is a great thing. Let's go ahead and do it. But we need to have this done. Again, Risch's number, 734-6780. I also have a number for Congressman Mike Crapo on the local level, and his telephone number, 734-2515. I hope you're being able, you've got plenty of time to jot all of this down because I'm not going to spend the rest of the show repeating it. As I say, I've already put it up online. But if you're looking to reach Mike Crapo, his office number locally is 734-2515. Once more, U.S. Senator Mike Crapo's office in Twin Falls, 734-2515. You've got to give these people a telephone call and at least say, hey, how come we're not getting any say in any of this? This is vitally important, I think, to the future of this community. It is going to change the nature of this community. And I think we're all very aware of that. And I think for that very reason, we need to have some sort of input of our own. And I don't think anybody out there in the rest of media wants you to have that. Because if what I'm reading from the spokesman at College of Southern Idaho, the view over there is, you're just a bunch of bigots and no one needs to listen to you. Therefore, you're disqualified from having any comment about this. And that is the left's usual means of defense. What they are telling us, what they are trying to do with all of us, is they are simply saying, we know better, shut your mouths. And obviously, you can only be opposed to this because we know it's right. So therefore, if you're opposed, it's wrong. And it's wrong because therefore you must be a knuckle-dragging bigot. That's what we're dealing with here, right? I mean, that's the situation we find ourselves in. I'm going to tell you right now that this is going to be critical because I have lived places that have been so dramatically changed, sometimes by for the good. I'll admit that. I was a young reporter working in Syracuse, New York in the 1990s, through the late 80s and the 1990s. And we had a number of people who moved into town who were resettled from Southeast Asia, Vietnamese, Hmong, Laotian, and these people all came in, and they moved into some neighborhoods that had been plagued by drugs. But when they ended up taking over the neighborhoods, guess what? They cleaned up the neighborhoods. They opened up their own shops. They were entrepreneurs. They really made a difference in their community. I should also point out a lot of those Southeast Asians were actually Christians too. So it wasn't difficult. They just started going to all of the churches that were already in the neighborhood. Culturally, we have to ask, can we pull this off? Questions that need to be answered. I've got more on this topic coming up in just a few minutes. Bill Colley with you on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Steve Millington will be along as well just after the 8:30 break. It's 9:20. 54 at our studios. And keep in mind, you may have an opportunity to participate. A little later in the program, you may hear a prompt that will allow you, in fact, sometimes during the course of the day, maybe even as late as Glenn Beck, you'll hear that opportunity to participate and pay your bills. You could end up winning a pretty good wad of cash. Let me just put it that way. Take care of a lot of bills and maybe pay for a good vacation this summer as well. Speaking of cash, everyone looks to earn a little extra cash. How about a part-time job with Western States Bus Services, where they are hiring part-time bus drivers right now, split shifts, 5 days per week, summers off, and scheduled no school days. The pay is $10.75 per hour. You could apply today by contacting 733-8003. Western States Bus Services is an equal opportunity employer. Also, tomorrow on our program, between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine. We're going to be talking about silent killers, those things that you may not even realize that are wrong with you. Well, we're not saying you've got anything wrong with you, but you could. I mean, we'll be honest about that. You could. And if that's the case, really you should go see the doctor, because you could be walking around and you could look the picture of health, but something could be wrong inside. It could be a ticking time bomb. So tomorrow, we do this every Wednesday, Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine. We'll have a medical professional in studio between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, and they'll be willing to take your telephone call. Remember, Tripp Family Medicine is located on Fillmore Street in Twin Falls, and life's too short not to feel good. Does anybody know who this woman, Pamela Geller, is? Speaking of her problems with the Islamic world, She made an appearance yesterday on CNN. Allyn Camerata, who used to be at Fox News, now works over at CNN. In other words, Fox decided that she was no longer a first-teamer, so she's gone to work in the minor leagues. So she's now working at the Clinton News Network. And it's funny, when she was working at Fox, you would have thought she was a conservative. But you know what? Hey, here's a paycheck. All right, now I'm a liberal. Funny, a lot of people in the media are like that. They're one paycheck away from becoming a liberal. She was on with Pamela Geller talking about this conference in Garland, Texas. You know, you had some Islamic radicals try to shoot it up on Sunday. And Geller was saying that the violence that happened is actually, it underscores, it makes the whole point of the conference clear.
Well, it's dangerous because increasingly we're abridging our freedoms so as not to offend savages. The very idea that if something offends me or I'm insulted by something, I'll kill you, and that way I can get my way. And somehow this is okay with members of the elite media and academia is outrageous.
Yeah, absolutely. Except media on the other hand, now is attacking her. In fact, we have a story out today, and I happen to see it in the Wall Street Journal. There was going to be an award ceremony in this country for the people at Charlie Hebdo, which is the French publication that was shot up by Islamic radicals a few months ago. And now you've got a lot of American liberals who don't want the award given to them, saying, well, but they were offensive. In other words, liberals are saying you ask for it. And here's Allyn Camerata going at it with Pamela Geller during the course of Clinton News yesterday.
I haven't heard anyone in the saying that it's okay for gunmen to show up at an event like this. But what people are saying is that there's always this fine line, you know, between freedom of speech and being intentionally incendiary and provocative.
Intentionally incendiary and provocative by drawing a cartoon. This is the low state of freedom of speech in this country. I disagree, and I disagree most vehemently. The First Amendment, not the 8th, not the 10th, but the first, protects all speech, not just ideas that we like.
I don't like CNN, so maybe that should go off the air. I demand it. I don't think that it has any value, and I think that it is un-American, and therefore it hurts my feelings. So we need to get rid of it. But of course, I would not go in there and shoot the place up. I would just simply say, you got to lock the doors. They wouldn't listen to me. Geller has a snappy comeback to the liberal, what you'd call, attack she's now under, because she's willing to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to speak my mind.
Inoffensive speech, Allyn, needs no protection. But in a pluralistic society, you have offensive speech. You have ideas. You have an exchange of ideas. You don't shut down a discussion because I'm offended. If something offends me, should I go out and slaughter people?
Sure,
when Jesus Christ was put in a jar of urine, it was called art. Did Christians like it? Of course not. Did they slaughter people? Did they burn embassies? Did they kill whole communities? Of course not. This cannot be sanctioned.
And you know what? Potentially coming to a magic valley near you. 828, Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX, as well as online. You can hear us anywhere all over the world. NewsRadio1310.com. Just click on the Listen Live icon. 58 now at our studios. This is going to be, I should point out, the last warm day, at least for the next few days. There is rain in the forecast, but what I've always noticed when we're reading forecasts around here, in the extended forecast, there's always rain. And then the closer you get to that prediction, the less rain there's going to be. But we do have the possibility of some rain on Thursday and Friday mornings. The temperatures, daytime highs, are going to be dropping back into only the 60s, and we're going to have some cool overnights again. I was able for the second night in a row to sleep with my bedroom windows open last night, and I'll tell you what, it's a great comfort. You know, I think you breathe better, and you just feel better with that breeze blowing through. It's a safe city right now too, so you can have your windows open. But who knows? Again, coming to a magic valley near you. We've got a guest coming up with us in just a few minutes. Steve Millington is the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. He will join us in studio, as he does most Tuesday mornings. Got a lot to talk about. Special session of the state legislature on the way on May 18th. That's a week from Monday. As well as, in fact, we're going to talk a little bit about some of these presidential candidates. A couple more came out of the woodwork yesterday. Another one is expected today. In fact, his announcement has greatly changed the content of my show. We'll have more details on that coming up as well in just a few minutes. Joining me in the studio, Steve Millington. He is the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. and he drops by on Tuesday mornings. It's 59, coming up on 8:34, and we were just talking a little bit earlier this morning about the special session of the legislature coming up. Oh, it has really annoyed the people at the newspaper because, first of all, we were going to lose $43 million in federal tax money, that carrot and stick that the federal government throws at us. And now the newspaper says, oh, this will cost $36,000 to have the legislature meet for a day, and tens of thousands of children in the Magic Valley will starve if we don't do this. So here we go, Steve. You've got a lot to talk about today.
Yeah. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. How we turn a molehill into a mountain.
Yes.
Now, the special session is going to convene a week from Monday on the 18th. So we got a couple of weeks to get this all put together. It's interesting that Randy Staples in a recent op-ed piece said the one thing that you can rest assured about special sessions is that they're going to have the whole thing scripted carefully before they ever come to town. Mm-hmm. And so I think part of the reason why that it's taken them 6 weeks since the adjournment of the regular legislative session is to make sure that everybody is on the same page with what it is we're trying to get done. Now, the particular piece of legislation that they're wanting the only one that they're going to take up is what they call House Bill 1067. I think that's the right number, 1067. It was held in committee by the regular session, and everybody screams and yells. They should have just put it on the floor and we could have been done with it, and that was the end of it. But at that point in time, when that thing was held in committee, there was considerable question as to whether or not it could actually pass on the floor of the House. And so the chairman of the committee that was holding it, and I think it was the Judiciary and Rules Committee, he would really like to have seen the bill go to the floor. And the vote was 9-8. So his was a swing vote, if you will. If he had sent the bill to the floor, and for whatever reason, it either got refused or rejected on the floor, on the full floor of the House, that bill could not be reintroduced until the next legislative session, which would have been January of next year. And so he voted to hold it in committee, knowing that there would most likely be a special session. And so he held it. They were able to put together the changes and adjustments that they wanted, and now we can have a special session. If it had gone to the floor and failed, they couldn't bring it up again until next January. Now, there's all kinds of, where the federal government's going to cram down on our throat, the stick and carrot routine. Yeah, and that's true. If you think you got a free society, you need to just figure out just exactly how much the federal government is jamming down on us.
But they like that over at the newspaper.
Oh yeah, the liberals are really going to love it. Sure they are. Now, the $36,000, get over it. Just get over it, newspaper people. Forget it.
The governor's taking a trip to Peru with business leaders, Peru and Mexico. How much more is that? Far more expensive day or trip there than...
Yeah, for a week he's going to be gone down there doing, a business alliance meetings. Okay, fine. That's going to be a lot more than $36,000. Now, since we have had the regular session close, the people have been working on this 1067 bill and trying to get the appropriate amendments and adjustments and so forth to the bill so that they can get a bulletproof vote in the legislature. That means they want to have a 2/3 majority so that it's veto-proof across the board. They're working to get that accomplished. Now, they have since determined that we can have some amendments, even though the federal law said, no. We can have some amendments. Other states have included amendments in the same bill that they had to pass. And so, yeah, we can have some. However, if you read the Constitution of the United States, I think it's Article 6, I could be mistaken, treaties supersede all state laws. And so even though we might make an amendment, the federal treaty is going to have the final say. That's the law of the land. So an amendment, so what? And we're talking about making sure that we get all of these people in foreign countries. We got to have a method whereby we can go collect the child support payments that are not being sent back to the appropriate parties. That's easy to fix. We just put a rock on their passport.
Yeah.
And if they try to come back in the United States, the first thing we say is, not until you make a full payment of all of your child support payments.
Although if they claim they're refugees, they can resettle them in Jerome or somewhere.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. We've got more coming up.
We have to take a break, right?
Steve Millington with us on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We're going to talk a little bit about Ben Carson and the like in just a few minutes on Top Story with Bill Colley. So today, Mike Huckabee is scheduled to announce that he is candidate for president of the United States, one of those Republican hopefuls. In fact, we should have Mike Gallagher today, who will be filling in at least for a while for Governor Huckabee. Mike Gallagher will be taking over what has been the Huckabee Report here on News Radio 1310 KLIX, as well as newsradio1310.com. That means you can listen to us online anywhere all over the world. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. My very special guest in studio, Steve Millington. He is the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. Right now it's 8:44. It's 59 at our studios. Well, it's a little warmer inside, but it's 59 outside. I think you can all. Steve's in short sleeves. He's nice and comfortable already.
I kind of enjoy the 1st of May. I just have this personal thing. After the 1st of May, I refuse to wear a jacket or a sweatshirt. It's supposed to be warm. So that's worked real well so far this month. It worked really good in most of April, and it wasn't supposed to. But
it's a little cooler this year so far, though, than it has been in recent years in the spring. We had an announcement yesterday from Ben Carson in the morning, during this show, in fact, and then Carly Fiorina in the afternoon. Today it'll be Governor Huckabee. This morning there was a liberal columnist at the Washington Post who said that Ben Carson has a big ego, and I thought, somebody in media saying that's really the pot calling the kettle black.
Isn't that
and
something?
that no pun intended there either, but Mr. Carson, he could be the second consecutive African-American president we've had in this country. What's your take on all of these big names?
Well, we're getting an awful lot of names out there, and the real players in this little process have yet to come forward. We haven't heard from we haven't heard from Scott Walker. We haven't heard from Jeb Bush. I think Chris Christie is kind of falling by the wayside here. There's just too much stuff that seems to be following him around.
It's not as bad as what Clinton does, but because he's a Republican, of course.
That's right. Because he's a Republican, he's going to get really slammed, something terrible. We haven't heard from Rick Perry yet. Rick Santorum, everybody says he's going to announce here probably before fall. And that's not that far away anymore. It is already May, and so September's not too far out. There's a few that are way on the fringe edge that I just look at and say, don't waste my time. They talk about a Lindsey Graham, and I just say, go back to South Carolina and leave us alone. John Kasich from Ohio, that's interesting, but...
he's that guy who wants that constitutional convention.
Yes. And it isn't really, is it a constant, let's see, it's a...
one issue, he says.
One issue convention. And if they can pull that off... and it's a states convention. It isn't that we all agree to one single issue, and then we say, here's what we want added to the Constitution, and then we all ratify it, and that's just the way it is. And if I remember right, the one issue that they're talking about is called balanced budget.
Yes.
And that would be a challenging little deal. So some of these guys drive me nuts. I think they need to go away. I think the current governors, Walker, Jindal, Kasich, and Christie, they all look pretty comfortable right now. The economy is doing great, and everything is, they have had a real string of positive points. If the economy should slow down, maybe take a little dip into the recession waters, those governors could have a tough time because they're going to have to explain or defend economic issues, and that's not what they really want to do. They want to go after more of these social and political type issues and leave the economy out of this thing. And frankly, the old adage, it's the economy, stupid. That's not going to go away. So the current governors could have to explain that any kind of a hiccup, disruption in the economic situation, that would make it hard for them to change the dynamic of the actual campaign, and so that could be awkward for them. However, former governors who don't have to continue to explain that current situation, like a Bush, like a Rick Perry, they could see their star begin to shine quite a bit brighter.
We have a caller with us, but quickly, I know that you like Rick Perry.
I do, and I really like Bobby Jindal.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
I listened to Carly Fiorina last night on a couple of news shows, and boy, she is really one bright.
Yeah.
Whoa. She is sharp.
And you can't pull the war on women thing there out too often.
Yeah, right.
We have a caller with us. You're on the air on Top Story with Steve Millington and Bill Colley on News Radio 1310 KLIX. It's 8:49.
Good morning.
Yeah. I think the people claiming to be Republicans because they have an R on the end of their title need to be weeded out. Chris Christie doesn't live by his title. He's already been downgraded 9 times in his state. He's a weasel, and I wouldn't vote for him for all the rice in China.
That's a good point. And some people say, well, this is the process by which we vet all of these candidates and decide which ones we really want to. And I look at it and I say to myself, Judas Priest, we got a dozen of them out there. Mm-hmm. We have littered the field with potential candidates.
And I want to thank the caller. Christie he's a gun control advocate.
Yes, he is.
That bothers me right away. I don't think he could not win any primaries anywhere, even on the East Coast, with that approach.
When you say even on the East Coast, that's a really telling statement.
Right. You have a lot of in places like Rhode Island and Massachusetts and New York, you've got a lot of very liberal Republicans, and he would still not win those primaries because of that issue.
That's right. Now he doesn't have a snowball's chance on a hot August day when you get past the Midwest, the Dakotas and Kansas and Colorado and Oklahoma and Texas. He's done.
The only thing I've ever liked about him, he is willing to tell the media, go pound salt.
Yep. And
if more Republicans would do that, and maybe Rand Paul does a bit of it at times, but I think that it's difficult for any Republican to pull that off. Ronald Reagan was probably the master at it. Of the group, Jindal, I'll tell you what, when I hear this guy talk, I know he's not the most exciting speaker in the world, but the fact of the matter is he's got a set of core values. And Rick Perry, who I had friends who gave Rick Perry a hard time 4 years ago, saying, well, first of all, when he had that gaffe on stage, big deal. Number 2, he was taking painkillers for a bad back. That may have had something to do with it. Good. Number 3, they criticized him. They said, well, he's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, so therefore he's a globalist. But he got on board with the Council on Foreign Relations simply because he wanted to put it on his resume that he had some discussions in foreign policy experience.
Foreign policy issues. Yep.
And there's a guy who would back our right to the Second Amendment to no end.
Exactly. And I think one of the things we've got to find is quit telling me what I want to hear and tell me what I have to hear. And we don't have very many people, especially in the public arena, who will make that kind of a statement and say, wait a minute, that's not the way it works. This is what has to happen, and this is how we make it work. And the impact on you will be very short-lived, and a year from now, you'll be much better. We don't want to hear that. We are the now generation. When I grew up, there was a breakfast cereal called Mapo. I don't think very many people have ever heard of that. Well, the younger generation.
I want my Mapo.
I want my Mapo, and I want it right now. The key is that I want it right now. We have no inclination to wait even a few moments for our Maple. We want it right now. We are the now generation. McDonald's and Burger King have gotten tremendous market presence, and they can, in 15 seconds or 30 seconds at the most, they can create a need, make you hungry, and show you how to satisfy that hunger need in either 15-second spot or a 30-second spot. And you see it many, many times every single day. So in 30 seconds, I go from not wanting something to eat to being hungry to knowing exactly what I want to eat and where to go to get it in 30 seconds. We are the now generation.
8:53, and you're listening to News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com online. Steve Millington is our guest in the studio. He is the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. You could reach Steve by giving us a shout at 736-0300. That number once more, 736-0300. Carson, who I like, I just don't think the guy has I think he's very much a long shot. I know a lot of people, he's a very devout Christian. I know a lot of people and he's been very successful in a very difficult job.
Yes, he has.
But I get the feeling that a lot of people, they just don't think that the guy's got enough behind him. What's the word they used to use years ago? Gravitas. They used to use that on TV all the time. They just don't feel he has enough in the background. But he's not. He and Fiorina are not career politicians.
No, they're not. Those are the two, should we call them outsiders? And that's a bad term, but maybe it fits. And simply for that reason, I want to hear what they say, because I sometimes become a little bit frustrated with the canned rhetoric that we get from the career politicians. Now, we've got three United States senators who probably don't fit the career politician mantra either. You got Rand Paul and Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. They are all first-term U.S. senators, so they have not been there forever and ever and ever. So they are kind of new at the process as well. So
I like Cruz a lot, but I just feel that if he's born in Canada, that question is going to haunt him all through a campaign.
And they try to keep diffusing that every time we hear a comment or a publicity charge on Ted Cruz. They discount it and say, look, his mother was a U.S. citizen, and therefore that makes him a U.S. citizen by birth, and so they're trying to diffuse that, but the media will not let that go away.
I like everything Paul has to say on the domestic level, but I know the concern is if someone shoots at us, would he be willing to shoot back? And that's the one problem he faces.
Well, and more important than that, he kind of believes that maybe we need to be a little bit more isolationists. And I get tired of having the foreign thing just shoved down on me all the time. However, we can't be isolationists. Just a brief example. A convenience store that I go to once in a while, not regularly, but once in a while, has got one of these really new, fancy, high-tech soda fountain machines where you push it's a touch screen, and you push the screen and it tells you what soda do you want, and so you push the one you want, and that light flash and it says do this. Well, you push the button and out comes. Inside that machine is a device which meters the amount of syrup from your soda with the CO2 to mix it up together and create your soda drinks. That's got fizz in it. That little device that meters those two so that you get the right flavoring malfunctioned, broke, or whatever. That machine had been out of service now for about a month. Guess where the part is made?
It's not made here.
China.
Yes.
So when you can talk all you want to about being somewhat isolationist, people, that doesn't fit today's world. Too many things have happened that. And, I asked the manager, I said, what in the world do you do? And she said, I stand here with tears in my eyes and tell people they can't get a soda.
Yeah.
Well, holy cow. So, it would be nice if we could be completely isolationist in some regards, but it's not real. So Rand Paul is going to have to get past that issue very quickly. And the other thing is, what we're seeing in the world today is an absence of leadership. And when we see that, we immediately have a vacuum, and somebody else is going to fill it.
We've got about 1 minute before we wrap up. We've got a caller with us, too, so you've got to make it quick. You're on air on News Radio 1310 KLIX.
Well, you bring up a good point there about the fact that we've moved all 40,000 factories overseas or to Mexico, Canada since NAFTA, and now we're negotiating a trade deal that's going to be merge our economic and political entities with the EU and the Pacific Rim countries. And we need to be contacting our senators. These are not trade deals; these are trade merger deals, and we really need to pose it. We can't even run a military without foreign parts now, and that's really scary.
That is scary.
He's got a great voice, by the way. He should be doing commercials for us.
Hey, thanks for the call.
And thanks to Steve Millington for dropping by. We'll see you again, I believe, next week.
Yep, sure will be.
We'll be a little closer to that special session.
Yep.
Who knows? Maybe they'll add another bill or two.
I don't think so, but we'll find out.
Get the job done and go home.
Yes, that's right. Open at 8, go home by noon. That's the hope.
Yeah, well, we'll see about that.
Hope.
60 at our studios. It's 8:59, and we've got Wayne Allyn Root joining us. He's going to be talking with us about the problems we have in our inner cities. Former Libertarian candidate for president as well, and he's a columnist at Town Hall and some other publications. He says he has the prescription to cure the ills of our inner cities. Details on the way. 9 o'clock news, though, first from Fox. And thank you very much. It's a balmy 60 at 9:06 at our studios, and thank you for joining us this morning. I've been telling you in the previous hour we have a guest who's joining us for a few minutes right after the newscast, and his name is Wayne Allyn Root. For a little bit of background, if my memory serves me right, he was a Libertarian Party candidate for president, and I've been reading his work for years at various websites, Town Hall included, and he also has a website of his own called rootforamerica.com. That is spelled ROOT. rootforamerica.com. But first of all, sir, welcome to our program.
Hey, Bill, how are you?
Wonderful. We were going to talk about a couple of different topics this morning, but you have a what we call a very hot topic that is suddenly breaking that you're writing about this morning. A lot of people out here in this part of the country, certainly they hear the acronym IRS, and it raises a few hackles. You've got some issues yourself going on right now.
Well, yeah, it's one of the lead stories at Fox News this morning. It's the lead story at the top of Blaze, Glenn Beck's site that I believe now is the third most popular political website in the United States of America, like 30 million people every month. So it's getting some major traction, and it's about the fact that I was attacked by the IRS. I was targeted. I was persecuted. I was targeted for extinction by the IRS, and it's no coincidence because I'm Obama's college classmate at Columbia University, and I'm in the news nonstop attacking Obama and giving it to him as good as anyone could give it to him. And they wanted to stop me, and they wanted to distract me, and they wanted to stall me, and they wanted to intimidate me. And the upshoot that's in the news now is that after 2 IRS audits in a row covering 3 years, I finally won both cases, and Judicial Watch decided to take a look at this thing and request all my files from the Internal Revenue Service to see why the IRS would be going after a critic of the president. Just by pure coincidence, it was just a random audit of a critic of the president who happens to be his college classmate who's in the news really attacking the heck out of Obama. And we all knew it wasn't a coincidence. And so sure enough, we've come up with some evidence. It took us 14 months to get my tax files. Luckily, Judicial Watch and myself are both relentless, and we kept going after him and going after him and going after him. By law, the IRS had 30 days to hand it over, and it took 14 months. And now we know why they stalled. Judicial Watch is the #1 government watchdog in the country, and they've uncovered by looking through hundreds, if not thousands, of pages of my IRS files. It's so big, I didn't even take a shot at it. They just had their investigators comb through them, and they found some really interesting things. First of all, it was in the news, Bill, just a couple of days ago that the head of the IRS said, if you ever get a call from the IRS, hang up because they don't call anyone. They send you a notice in the mail. They never call. So you don't even have to worry about it. If you get a call, it's a scam. Well, guess what? My IRS inquiry began with a call. And when I didn't answer and they had to leave a voicemail, guess what they did next? They called my accountant. And when my accountant said, you can never call Wayne Root again, I have the power of attorney, never speak to him again, guess what the IRS agent did then? Called me again to tell me all about my political views. Yeah, the IRS agent called me to lecture me about my political views. So I knew, and my accountant knew, and my lawyers knew, it was a very, odd, over-the-top IRS audit with some really weird things happening. They asked weird questions of my accountant he'd never heard before in his entire life. He said, "This is political. Something's wrong here." So anyway, it's very important key information here when I tell you they called me and lectured me about my politics. Because now we get my files and Judicial Watch digs into them, and what do we find? Extensive notes in my files in the margin from the IRS auditor telling how he spent hours and hours on the internet studying Wayne Root's political views.
At this stage of the game, I guess the old call to abolish the IRS, you're more than ever for that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the IRS is, listen, this reminds me of the Gestapo. I'm Jewish by birth, and my relatives were murdered in Nazi Germany. And this reminds me of the Stasi in East Germany, or the KGB in Russia, or the Nazis and the Gestapo in Germany. You cannot, in a free democratic society, have A, politicians ordering the IRS to destroy, like hitmen, your political opponents, B, trying to silence free speech, and C, you can't have IRS agents that base audits on your political views. If you do, everyone's got to go to prison. Every one of those people has got to go to prison. This is really bad stuff for the United States of America. And I don't say that as a conservative. I say that as an American. If a conservative gets elected president, I want him to pass a wonderful conservative Republican agenda. But I don't want him to go after liberal opponents with the Internal Revenue Service. If he does, he belongs in jail the same way Nixon, the same way Obama should be in jail for what they did to me. So number one, in the margins of the thing we find, that they went after my personal views. Number two, it says that he called me, so there's the proof he called me. Number three, guess what other revelation was in there? The whole inquiry was started by a United States Senator from Oregon. Now, there are two U.S. senators from Oregon at the time this happened, both Democrats, so we can now tie the entire scandal to the Democratic Party. It wasn't just the IRS fishing on their own, folks. A Democratic U.S. senator. Now, who was one of the two? Ron Wyden. Do I know it was him? No, but I know he was the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee with oversight over the IRS. So I'm sure that Ron Wyden would be the number one suspect at this point. Why would the head of the Finance Committee of the United States Senate be interested in me when he's got more important things to worry about, like, Iran getting a nuclear weapon, ISIS, how about, immigration and the border being wide open, Obamacare and the mess of the healthcare system? U.S. senators are now involved in individual taxpayers' audits? Really? You mean that wasn't upon orders of the Obama White House?
I have to tell you, I have a former coworker, you probably are familiar with her, by the name of Christine O'Donnell, and she has gone through this same, but again, it's been years now, and she still doesn't have any answers, and trying to actually get answers is next to impossible, I would imagine.
Well, that's why I think this is amazing stuff. This is deadly stuff. I've got all of this in the hands of the United States Senate Committee investigating the IRS, but I think this is proof of criminal actions. It's proof of the Democratic Party tied to the IRS in this. It's proof of a very important United States Senator, Democrat, tied to it. Not only that, guess what day my case ended? Out of the blue, they ended my case after harassing me for 3 years and never letting go. They finally called and said, it's over. And my lawyer said, yeah, really? It's over. Why is it over? And he said, I just got a call from a big shot at the IRS who told me I have to end the case today. And guess what day that was? It was May 23rd, which is the day after Lois Lerner. It was the day Lois Lerner was suspended, and the day after she testified in front of the United States Congress and took the fifth on the grounds it might incriminate her. So my guess is Lois Lerner was heavily involved personally in my case. Why else would all that timing be a mere coincidence? Come on, folks. I may have been born yesterday, but I wasn't born in the last hour. Also interesting to note that they wrote on my files, sensitive case. Now, folks, again, I want to remind you, this is the IRS. What's sensitive about Wayne Root's case other than politics? Well, of course, that's what they meant. Politically sensitive. Why do they even know my politics? Why are my politics involved in an IRS audit? If it was a random audit, why would you write sensitive case? If it's a random audit, why would you end it out of the blue with a top IRS official the day after Lois Lerner testified? If it was a random audit, why is a U.S. senator involved?
Wayne Allyn Root, you're raising some great questions. I know you're a busy man today, and you've got some other folks to talk to before we wrap up. Any parting thoughts?
Well, the parting thought is that America is in a very bad place right now. I think we're teetering on the edge of disaster. I think the average person watches the evening news with dinner in their hands and their family gathered around, and they get nothing but lies and propaganda from the national media. This story, I'm telling you, should be the number one story in America. It'll never make it on NBC Evening News because they censor what you see in the news, and they don't let you hear anything bad about Obama, nor do they let you hear anything bad about the economy. My next column, which will be coming out in the next 2 weeks, I've just compiled over the last month, Bill, like 75 news stories at obscure economic sites and Wall Street insider sites that indicate we're on the verge of a total economic collapse. But if you turn into the evening news, which I watch every night just to see how comedic it is, it's better than Saturday Night Live, they never mention there's a problem. As a matter of fact, they tell you the economy's rolling along, everything's fine. Well, I got 75 links to major articles by economists telling you we are on the verge of disaster, and that doesn't even include the fact that the debt is up 75% since the early 2000s and interest rates are at zero. If you ever raised interest rates back to historic norms, you would have interest on the debt that would bankrupt the United States of America instantly. So we're between a rock and a hard place. You can never allow a raise in interest rates. Never. So we have to keep them at zero or close to zero for the next 20 years. Otherwise, we couldn't pay the debt. If interest rates are at zero, guess what happens to every older person that saves? They get nothing. So this country is a ticking time bomb as we speak, thanks to the debt and the spending and the taxes and the regulations and the Obamacare destruction of Barack Obama. You'll never get that in the evening news. So you'll get it in my new book, by the way, The Murder of the Middle Class, which has 400 pages of facts what Obama's done to America, and that's the point I'm trying to make. Stop listening to the mainstream media. Start listening to people like Bill and like yours truly, Wayne Root, and The Murder of the Middle Class. And my website where my commentaries are all free, root4america.com, ROOT, 4america.com. Get the real news and understand what you're facing and get some real solutions for you individually. I think it's too late to save America, but each of us individually can save our families, and I got lots of great solutions in the murder of the middle class.
Super. Hey, good luck to you. We'll talk to you again, I hope, sometime soon.
Thanks, Bill. Anytime. Bye-bye.
All right. Wayne Allyn Root joining us this morning. And originally he was going to sit down and chat with us about his prescription for curing big cities in America, Baltimore, for instance. And he says it's not done through money. But we were talking during the news at 9 o'clock off air. And he said, there's a big story brewing. He said, my phones are ringing off the hook this morning. He said, I just discovered some details about my case with the Internal Revenue Service. I said, okay, we can talk about Baltimore another day. And he said, yeah, all right, that's fine with me. Wayne Allyn Root, the last time I actually talked to the man on a radio show, I have to point out, was probably a good 10 years ago. But he is really, if you get a chance, you can see a lot of his work at Town Hall and various other websites. And as he pointed out, his website, root4america.com. That is root4america.com. And I think his point is valid. If these things can happen to him, they can happen to anyone. And this is very critical for us to think about. And I referenced Christine O'Donnell's case, which is still unanswered at this point. For those of you who don't know the background, of course, I worked in Delaware for 7 years before coming here. One of the reasons I ended up getting the full-time talk show at my old radio station was because Christine had been a part-time talk show host there. The job was offered to her. She didn't want it, so it fell to me. And then, of course, later she made a couple of runs for U.S. Senate. And when she announced her run in 2010, March of 2010, that she was going to be a candidate, on that very day, the IRS started leaking her tax records, and the state of Delaware as well, to the media. And also they started auditing her, and the probe went on for a good couple of years before it was finally discovered what was taking place. So this is happening to people. It's political payback in this country right now from the American left. And as Root told us just a few minutes ago, it's reminiscent of the KGB and the Stasi in East Germany. And as Steve Millington said in the last hour, we think we live in a free country any longer. Got news for you. Not the case. We've got more coming up. Bill Colley with you this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Got a couple of things, too. We've got a new advertiser with us who I'm very grateful to say has joined this program. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that, too, in the next segment of the program. Got a lot to talk about, too. He spoke about Obamacare a few minutes ago. I've got news for you. It's already bankrupted one insurance company. Big story about that out today, too, as well. 60 at our studios. It's 9:20. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Hope you're having a great day, and I hope you stick around. I mean, if you don't, I know where you live. I was out for a walk the other day, just walking around the canyon rim and getting a little exercise. And I've done it a few times. I've been passing this beautiful house that's for sale. Somebody told me it's got a price tag of about $8 million. Wouldn't surprise me. Lots of windows, great views of the canyon behind it. But all of these people are walking by getting their daily exercise, and all of these windows, you can see inside. You can see just about everything that happens in that house, which means, of course, privacy would be an issue. I want to tell you a little bit about how you can take care of that today. Window tints. In fact, Tint Lady is busy working in the area doing that for people who would like a little more privacy. Have you noticed any fading of your floors, furniture, pictures, cabinetry, etc.? It may be the result of too much UV light coming into your home as well. UV light can damage these things over time. Have you ever thought about tinting your home or office windows? See, this is a true story. I had a jacket one time, a blue navy jacket. I went to work and I threw it over the passenger seat and I left it in the car in the sunlight. And then I went back out the next day and didn't pick it up, and I left it there for a second day. And when I got home after the second day, I picked the jacket up, and it was two-toned. The blue had faded in the sunlight, so the sunlight can do that. Now, tinting your home or office windows can save you on power, and, of course, it will save on your paint as well, because your paint won't flake as fast or fade as fast. You can get a free estimate. You can call and schedule an appointment today. And I have a number. Remember, these people have over 20 years experience, locally owned, so you know who they are. 736-8469. That is 736-8469. Also, great people, by the way, who make this show possible every day, including the folks at Western States Bus Services, where they are hiring part-time bus drivers right now, split shifts, 5 days per week, summers off, and scheduled no school days. The pay is $10.75 per hour. You can apply today by contacting 733-8003. Western States Bus Services is an equal opportunity employer. There you go. Hey, very quickly, too, I've got to share something with you. This morning when I was talking in the first part of the show, if you were with us just after the 8 o'clock news, I was talking with you about what you need to do when it comes to getting a response from government, about this effort to resettle potentially thousands of Islamists in the Magic Valley. And they're already here. In fact, I was telling Steve Millington during a commercial break, now perhaps they're not from this group, but we've been told that some of them have already been settled here since February. I was at Fred Meyer yesterday at the service counter, and I ran into several people, Arabic people. Now, didn't bother me. They seem to be there just doing their shopping as well. And we're not saying that we're opposed to people because of their beliefs or whatever, but we need to know some of these people have been involved in a civil war, and we need to know who they are before they come here, whether they're going to be calm neighbors or whether some of them, and it wouldn't take many now, would be dangerous neighbors. And every explanation I have had is that this is being done by fiat. Washington is ordering this, telling the folks at the local refugee resettlement center, you have to find places for these people to stay, and we're going to resettle them, give them job training, et cetera, all at your taxpayer expense. When do you get a say in any of this? When do you get to ask who these people are and if it's safe to have all of them here? Well, you don't. So I have been urging people to call Mike Simpson, your congressman, or call your 2 U.S. senators and say, when are we going to get an opportunity to be heard on this? So this morning I put up a post at our website, newsradio1310.com, and it's titled Commentary, Islamic Republic of Idaho. And it lists the telephone numbers so you can reach the offices of your federal representatives and senators. And you can raise that question. I also took that post after I finished it, and I provided the link at our News Radio 1310 KLIX Facebook page. Get this. Since about the time I put it up there about 6:20 this morning, 374 people have actually taken a look at that. 374. Now, the liberals out there can scream and yell that we're just being bigoted by bringing this up. But doesn't the majority have some sort of say in this country any longer? 374 people, so about 100 people per hour so far, are taking a look at this. I would tell all of those folks, the political folks, that your constituency definitely has a concern about this. You blame me if you want, but the fact of the matter is I seem to be just, riding the wave here because people are not happy about this. They want to know more about it, and they're not getting the answers that they need. And I told you already, a spokesman at the College of Southern Idaho yesterday implied that the people listening to my radio show who raise questions about this are bigots. That's what Lefty always does. Lefty always tries to deflect and claim that you're just being mean and that you're rotten. And if you're asking any questions, no, never you mind, in other words. Just go shut up, sit in the corner, and you're going to do what we tell you to because we elites, we know so much more than you do. That's what they're trying to pull on you this time. You've got to go check out my post. You've got to check it out on Facebook as well. The numbers are there to call Senator Risch's office, Senator Crapo's office, and also Congressman Simpson's office. Do that this morning because, believe me, they need to hear from you. 60 at our studios. It's 9:30. Bill Colley with you this morning. One more half hour of our program coming up. I had a story I wanted to share with you, too, as well. Obamacare is starting to bankrupt major insurance companies. Well, we always knew that was the goal, right? Once you do that, then you have to say, well, sorry, we're going to have a Canadian system in place. That seems to be what's up. They call it Alinskyism. More details ahead. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX, as well as online at newsradio1310.com. I think most everybody listening, I know there's some lefties listening too, but I would think that even among the most dense of those in the audience, they understand that selling insurance is a business. You realize that the guy who has the local insurance agency, he's essentially a broker, right, for the large company. He makes his living that way. That's how he feeds his family. That's how he puts a roof over his head. That's how he affords clothes, right? You understand all of this. This is not something that's beyond, well, I know that Democrats have some difficulty with some of these things. Business people are always evil. You've got businesses closing in Seattle now, small businesses, because they can't afford to pay $15 an hour in minimum wage. For crying out loud. I mean, businesses warn them, and yet people who have no business experience jumped in and said, oh, no, you're just a bunch of evil capitalists. Yeah, a guy making pizza. A guy making pizza and trying to get by on whatever money he had to borrow to make it in the first place. Yeah, he's a big evil capitalist. He's your equivalent of some 1880s railroad tycoon. Well, healthcare and the healthcare industry is supported by insurance in this country, especially when it comes to catastrophic issues. Now, if you even own a large healthcare industry, well, insurance company that is, you have to make a profit. You don't do this because it's just fun. You're not independently wealthy and going to an office and doing this because, let me put it this way. A lot of these people who are actually running these companies, they are nice people. But they still have to make a profit because they have employees to pay as well. They've got to pay for their real estate, everything else that's part of this. Meanwhile, we heard warnings when Obamacare was going through. I was there the day that the House rammed it through over the objections of about 25,000 protesters outside the Capitol building. It was amazing. Michelle Bachmann on a Wednesday, she was then serving in Congress from Minnesota. She had issued a call to people to come out saying they're going to vote on this weekend. That was on a Wednesday. 25,000 of us or so showed up that Saturday morning outside the Capitol building to make our voices heard. Nancy Pelosi, who was still then Speaker of the House, she put guards outside, and these guards had rifles in case some of the people who were walking around pushing their children in baby carriages as a demonstrator, in case the baby got out of hand, I guess you could shoot up the carriage. But here we go. Despite all of the warnings that this was going to kill the insurance industry, this comes from The Hill, which is not a conservative publication by any means. ER visits climb under Obamacare, poll finds. I found this on the website of Congressman Andy Harris. He is a doctor. Congressman Harris posted this earlier today. And it says that emergency room visits have increased. 56% of the doctors surveyed said their ERs have seen an increase in Medicaid patients. So already we're breaking the system in that sense. And then over at the Daily Signal today, headline, after expanding under Obamacare, this 123-year-old insurance company is closing its doors. After expanding to do business or the Affordable Care Act's exchange, last year a Wisconsin-based health insurance company founded in 1892 has announced it will close. Assurant Inc. announced last week one of its subsidiaries, Assurant Health, an insurance company, will either be sold or shuttered after losing tens of millions of dollars. The decision comes 18 months after the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, and industry watchers argue Assurant Health, the end can be attributed to the new health care law. In a letter to its shareholders, Assurant Health said it lost money because of a reduction in recoveries under Obama's risk mitigation programs and increased claims on the health care law's 2015 policies. Remember, you were told, well, you've got to cover people with pre-existing conditions. You've got to cover kids till they're 68 on their parents' policies. Well, I might be a little exaggerating there, but you understand what I'm talking about. So you had all of these things. And what the libbies don't understand is that you can't run a business that way. Now, if the government wanted to put together some sort of program, and they already have one called Medicaid, right, for people who can't afford health care. I had a friend some years ago. He was selling real estate, and he had an insurance policy through his real estate. They had like a local affiliation or associates group. All the realtors in the area banded together, created this lobbying effort, but they also had their own insurance. He had a heart attack. He had to go to the hospital. He had to have a quadruple bypass, but he did not know this at the time. The insurance he thought would cover all of that did not. But as it turned out, the hospital itself had its own insurance and was able to do this. That was 2007, pre-Obamacare. So we already had a system in place called Medicaid for the poor in this country. It's poorly managed, and the budget for it is way out of whack, and it's going to bankrupt us, but we already had that. Insurance, though, on the other hand, it works that way. You sell people insurance because, you do it because at some point the guy who's actually selling it has to make a profit. Again, he's got to eat. He's got to put a roof over his head. He's got to feed his family. You've got all of those challenges that are going on out there. These are not slaves to the general public. And yet here we are. We're going to be bankrupting all of these insurers. What happens when there are no insurers, health insurance left? Well, we have the solution. There's the old, what do they call it, Hegelian dialect, where you create the problem, then you amplify the problem, then you provide the solution. You see how that works? Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to need a national health care system, and we'll make all the doctors slaves to that, and we'll put them on a stipend every month, and then we can all go, and won't this just solve all of our problems? It's what the left always wanted, and they're getting it, this incrementalism that they have in their approach. They destroyed the system. They've created the problem. They're amplifying the problem. Now they're going to provide the solution, and that is going to be a single-payer health care system, which will only add to the bankruptcy of the United States of America. I have to take a break for a moment, but I'll be glad to take some of your telephone calls on the other side. 20 minutes from 10 o'clock, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX, 60 right now at our studios. Of course, you can reach my program by giving me a shout at 736-0300. Another opportunity would be to drop me an email at bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. Last name spelled Colley. bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. And again, the telephone number 736-0300. More details on Obamacare's problems. Washington Examiner, Obamacare exchanges are not cheap to build or run. The Washington Post, which is a liberal newspaper, has reported about half of these state-run exchanges, which were very, very expensive to build in the first place, don't bring in enough money to sustain themselves. Oops. Some states have already been forced to impose or are now considering new taxes and fees on health insurance policies to cover their exchanges' costs. This obviously defeats the purpose of subsidizing insurance in the first place. The case of Oregon, not too far away from us, controlled by liberals, after spending $200 million to develop its own health insurance exchange, the Beaver State was forced to abandon it altogether because of pervasive and intractable technical problems. Maryland had the same issue. They spent closer to $300 million. I think it was $261 million. And yet you've got the libbies over at the local newspaper here in Twin Falls screaming that we could lose $43 million because we won't sign an agreement with the federal government that will bind us to the federal government's rules on child support payments. And yet the figures that we're seeing that people are dealing with here in other states, just simply dwarf that. At what point do people start talking about secession again in this country? I mean, I think that's going to become, as Wayne Allen Root was telling us earlier, he said, I don't have any hope for this country's future any longer. He said, I'm trying to tell people how their families can survive. Ensure your family's survival. But it could well be, this country is already culturally several different, it's not the melting pot people ever thought it was going to be. But you could see that happening. You could see the Mountain West going completely. As a friend of mine once said, there are nuclear-tipped missiles in Wyoming. If Wyoming goes the other direction, who's going to stop them? Especially when they're sitting there with all of that hardware. Not that I don't think anyone would try. In fact, I think the left coast and the east coast would probably both say, good riddance, go away. And then they're going to find out a few years down the road we've been paying their freight. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX. It's 946.
Are you talking to me?
I am.
Oh, okay. Hi. I was calling about the comment that you just made about the computer system that really is at the heart of SB 1067. Well, during the 1990s, the Clinton and Gore administration redesigned or reinvented our government. And it really was a merger of the tech industry with our government. And all of the systems were redesigned to be integrated, high-tech computerized systems. The problem is that those systems are overhead for us, and they are profit for corporations, for the tech corporations. And so all this promotion of this new way of doing business and these new global systems and Obamacare and all of that, those systems are overhead for the American taxpayers. There is no benefit to us. There is only benefit really for the tech corporations that design and build them and maintain them.
You know what it reminds me of? Back in Nazi Germany, if IG Farben and Krupp Cannon and some of those companies were, and Mengele Tractor, if they were good sports about it, they got all of the government contracts. So that's how a fascist system works. And I know people think Bill Clinton and Al Gore, how dare you say fascist? Well, they've created this system, and it's very reminiscent of how the Nazis ran their economy as well. They favored certain state corporations that towed the line.
Well, yeah, and in this country, those corporations are the telecommunications companies and the tech companies. And 9/11 was the biggest boon for them they benefited more than anybody else, because everything to do with terrorism translates into high-tech systems, high-tech surveillance and information systems.
And in Colorado right now, they have, in fact, Wired Magazine did this story about a year and a half ago. They have a massive facility in Colorado where it's all centered. This is our future, and we allowed it to happen because we wanted the convenience.
Yeah, well, people, that's an easy sell, convenience and inefficiency, because people don't really understand that the real nature of these computer systems is management. It's all about management. And our children in the future, children and grandchildren, they will have no freedom because their entire lives from birth to death will be managed by these systems.
I thank you much for the call. I've got to run because we have Mike Gallagher coming up in just a moment. But great point. Great points, we should say. In fact, it's like Mr. Obama's Julia. Remember that cartoon character? Her life managed from cradle to grave by the government? Good golly, they'll just be putting tubes in us, running food in and out, and taking our waste away by the time we're all done. And that's all we'll be. Reminds me of the Matrix, where all the little babies were tied up to all those tubes in the field. The Huckabee Report is now Mike Gallagher. It is brought to you exclusively by the financial advisors at Waddell & Reed in Twin Falls, 736-6563. Huckabee's announcing right now that he's running for president as we speak. I thought this would be appropriate because, you're wondering what type of country are your children and grandchildren going to be living in. I think we have the answer. Haven't had to hear that in about 25 years, but I think it's making a comeback. Funny, the rest of the world is giving up on this sort of government, and we've got folks here who are demanding that's how we're going to be living in the future in the United States. I guess they feel they missed out on all the excitement, the gulags and the wars, and the political prisoners who are giving up all of their organs for the Politburo. 9:55. Bill Colley with you this morning. 60 at the temperature really hanging in there. 60 at our studios. And I do want to point out, Rush Limbaugh will be along following the news at 10 o'clock from Fox. Following news, in fact, at 1 o'clock this afternoon, Sean Hannity. Glenn Beck following news at 4 o'clock this afternoon. We've got Dave Ramsey tonight, and of course overnight, Coast to Coast with George Norrie. I also wanted to point out as well, tomorrow, in fact, tomorrow's the 6th, Thursday, when we talk about the fact that there may be, people say there's no hope left for the country at this point. Thursday is the National Day of Prayer. Maybe when you have nothing else, that's your only fallback position in life, really, isn't it? When you're think about it, when you lose everything else, it's a bit like being a baby all over again, and you need to rely on something. And I guess you have to rely on faith at that point. So Thursday, National Day of Prayer, and Friday. Gosh, Friday is a day. It's unfortunately there are not many of the people left who are part of that. You may remember Friday is May 8th. It was called VE Day when I was a kid growing up. It was still called that. It'll mark 70 years. We were talking about the Nazi Germans just a few minutes ago. 70 years this coming Friday since that government actually surrendered and wrapped up at least the war in Europe. Continued for a time in the Pacific, with the Japanese still battling on. When I was a kid growing up in a small town with just a couple of traffic lights, and my dad would take me to the parades. We would have a parade on Memorial Day. It wasn't very long. It was just some guys from the Legion, maybe a couple of fire engines, and some Boy Scouts. It would last just a few minutes, and then they would go to the cemetery afterward. But I can remember being in those parades, standing with my dad on the street, and all of these fellows would come up. And a lot of them were World War II veterans. At the time, in the early 1960s, they were still everywhere. And I thought they were all larger than life. And I can remember one year on my own with some friends, by the time I was old enough to do this, the parade took place in a nasty rainstorm, and it just rained, torrential type of rain all through the parade. And we decided to go to the cemetery. We were soaking wet. And one of my dad's cousins got up and started speaking. And I did not know this at the time, and no one had told me that he had been a prisoner of war in North Korea during the Korean War. Shot down as he was flying over, and he escaped imprisonment. And then he was captured again because he's the only guy well over 6 feet tall wandering around in black pajamas. And he escaped the second time. So the third time they put him to work on docks unloading ships, and then eventually he was among the lucky few who were able to come home. Many in captivity did not. And he gave a speech that day in that driving rainstorm, and I still remember it. And he was my high school guidance counselor as well a few years later following that. But I still remember that, and for the first time in my life, I really started to think about what these people gave to us. And you know what? They've got to be rolling over in their graves now because they've got to feel that we're letting it all slip away. God willing, and the creek don't rise, I am back in this seat tomorrow. Bill Colley with you on News Radio 1310 KLIX. As well as online, newsradio1310.com. You can click on the icon there, listen to us anywhere, all over the world, anytime you feel like it. Hope you have a great day.